Welcome back to another episode of the Construction Hall of Fame podcast. I've been waiting for this one for a while. Been really excited to have Rey Altamirano on the show, who's the director of healthcare construction at Peacock Construction in the Bay Area. Thanks so much for joining me today, Rey.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate it. Excited to be here.
Pleasure. Well, hey, just like we always like to do, if you wouldn't mind kicking it off from the top and letting us know as the audience what your career story and path looked like up to today.
Okay, cool. I kind of come from a line of lineage of construction folks. My grandfather was a carpenter. My dad was a carpenter. My dad was actually an immigrant from Mexico here and started off his career as a concrete foreman for Dinwiddie Builders here in the Bay Area. Worked a long time with them. Eventually started his own business and basically flipping real estate and managing properties. So at a very early age, we were drafted into his work crews to pick up garbage, pick up screws, do whatever we had to do in order to keep things moving forward in terms of his projects and cleaning up apartments to get them ready for vacancy. I hated it. I couldn't stand it. When I went off to college, Cal Poly, I told my dad I would never do construction ever again. I was a electrical engineering major, and I told him I wanted nothing to do with construction. Lo and behold, my junior year, a buddy of mine was taking a CM class with a professor named John Kubisak. Great guy, super dynamic. He said, "Rey, you got to take this business class. You're going to love this guy." And I did, and I was hooked. So I switched over from electrical engineering over to CM and have loved every minute of it. After college at Cal Poly there, I went off to work for a design company, actually, IDC, Industrial Design Company or Corporation. And I went there because it was right as the dot-com boom was going in 95. And I had kind of a background in electrical engineering. So I wanted to go build chip plants and do high-tech type construction. So I was there for about 5 years. I worked on my first mega fab with Intel over in Ronler Acres in Portland, Oregon, which was a wonderful project. Oregon had lots of rain, so my family and I decided to move back down to the Bay Area to be closer to the family. And eventually the dot-com boom, I stayed in high-tech construction for a bit with DPR construction, and then the dot-com boom started to dry out. Some friends of mine were working at HMH Builders here in the Bay Area. Healthcare was actually very, very strong. And Kaiser was building a huge template hospital, basically five blocks from the house there in Antioch. And I couldn't resist. HMH made me a great offer. And I was the first guy on that project and the last guy to leave there. That was the Kaiser Hospital in Antioch there. Wonderful job. HMH eventually became Swinnerton Builders now. Great company. I was with them for about 10 years. I handled a lot of the work in the Bay Area for them. The special thing about that is that I got to work on hospitals that were directly in my community, which was really, really cool. A friend of mine that was at Kaiser jumped ship and went over to Stanford to build their new children's hospital. And he asked me to join him as his, executive of construction on that hospital. So I made the jump to the owner side and worked there for a bit. I was at the children's hospital for about 4 years, working on all of the tower projects there. I decided that my gifts and my talents were better served doing construction. I really liked the contractor side. Webcor Builders was doing the new San Francisco General Hospital. It basically was their first OSHPOD project. And they were about halfway through, maybe a little further along. And they asked me to come on board to help them finish that project. So I joined Webcor and worked on that project and a handful of others. To get that one across the finish line. Great company, Webcor. Also worked on a couple landmark jobs. The one that first comes to mind was I'm drawing a blank here. Transbay Terminal, big mega project. I was on that project for a short bit, helping out with just all of the constraints, lots of constraints on that project. Working in downtown San Francisco, 1 million square feet. It was a wonderful project. After that, I moved on to San Francisco, the airport terminal, the international airport terminal. So I worked there for a bit, finished off a couple of jobs, and decided that I wanted to continue to do healthcare work. Webcor, really great, wonderful company, great people, but they really wanted to work on commercial work and not necessarily look at too much healthcare, and that's where my interest was. I joined Bolt, and they were just finishing off the Van Ness project. They were looking to basically continue to build their presence in the Bay Area. So I was basically helping manage the San Francisco office and the Sacramento office, lots of travel. So I decided to basically slow down a bit. I got 5 kids. You believe that, Matt? 5 children. So I'm a busy guy. 5 kids. So I decided that it was time for me to slow down a bit, work on smaller projects. I wanted to be closer to home. I was, commuting, 4 to 6 hours a day, and it just became too much. And the other thing is I wanted to work on smaller projects in my community. And that's kind of what brought me to Peacock. I don't know. You have any questions about that? That's kind of how I got to Peacock and kind of where I'm at today. Yeah.
Definitely have questions. I'd love to unpack that, but at the end of the day, it sounds like you've been working on, like you've said, a mixture, landmark projects, some smaller projects. Family comes into play. So when family comes into play, considerations become, some would say, less selfish and more centered around a family, not just what you're focused on, what your family's focused on. And sometimes I find it interesting, something that came to my mind. So one reason you left Webcor was the lack of healthcare projects in the pipeline. And so, especially as times get tough in the market and we're seeing this questionable market, if you will, I found companies who have versatile project sets have not only the ability to weather the storm better during times like this, but also the ability to retain people with different interests. Because obviously you're a talent people would love to have on their team. Imagine if Webcor had some subsets of healthcare, who knows? You might still be there today. You might not, but at the end of the day, it's just something that I was actually reading an article the other day where there was a bunch of heavy hitter construction executives commenting on the current market. And one thing that I forget exactly what executive it was, maybe with DPR, but he basically said, the current market, one way to really get around that is by having a solid, array of projects that you can work on, not just one specific niche, because some niches will be getting harder than other niches. And also you can retain people with different types of interests, like I said. So very interesting how your career's progressed. And now it sounds like you're a nice 15-minute work from the office and not too much commute, probably spend some more time with family. So it sounds like you found a win for yourself.
Yeah, I did. And I really love being here at Peacock. So I did interview before I left Bolt with other larger companies. But really what drew me here was just exactly what you said, the shorter commute and kind of the guaranteed shorter commute. In construction, you really can't pick where your projects are. Usually you have to go to where they're at, especially if you work for larger companies and larger projects. So the nice thing about being with Peacock is, they're kind of a community-based contractor. We're smaller. We have main office in Lafayette, and we have another office in San Francisco. Lafayette is literally 12 minutes from the house. So that really was a compelling reason for me to kind of choose Peacock. Small family-owned company. They've been around for about 40 years. Super customer-oriented. Really kind of a customer advocate. They really lend themselves to repeat work with clients. 95% of our business is repeat work with our clients. So there's a huge focus on making sure that we're maintaining relationships. So I like that. I really appreciated that about Peacock, and that's one of the big reasons why I'm here.
Love that. What exactly is your scope of responsibility as the director of healthcare construction?
That's a good question. So primarily, we have senior PMs, engineers. The way Peacock is set up, each PM is essentially his own business unit. And what I do, so that's in terms of, because we're smaller, when we work on smaller projects, those PMs are responsible for, ensuring that they do the BD and maintain the relationships with their clients. They do lots of their own estimating and bidding, as well as, executing the work out in the field with their superintendents and making sure operationally those are operating soundly. So my responsibility is making sure that everyone has the tools they need to execute work in a efficient fashion, making sure that they're taking care of their relationships, making sure that they're getting more work, those types of things. And then also making sure that we're targeting and prioritizing the right clients. So there is a lot of work out there. We don't necessarily go after all of it. We go after what makes the most sense for us. It's really important for us to align ourselves and our values with our clients. So that's a big part of what I do.
It sounds very similar to what Cecilia Kucharski, who's a VP at Webcor, described as the go, no-go methodology they go by over at Webcor and really throughout the industry. So you have a high-level focus on seeing what projects make sense for your company, what projects make less sense for your company. So feasibility, fitness-wise, what type of projects do you take on? And also, a lot of the time I've found construction job titles, depending on the company, can be quite fluid. One project manager at a company is a totally different definition of a project manager at another company. So it sounds like you could be along the lines of director of project management. Some companies would call it a project executive, but your title turns out to be director of healthcare construction. It seems to be a conglomerate of all the things we just talked about.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, exactly. And on certain jobs, ultimately, depending on the staff that we have, I've been known to kind of roll up my sleeves and, take on certain aspects of the project if necessary, if the job is big enough or complex enough. If we have staff that, needs additional support. That's the nice thing about working with a smaller company. You have the ability to be nimble and quick and make quick decisions, and roll up your sleeves where you see that there's a fit or a need.
It's a really good point. I'd like to segue into that. What's your experience been going from some of the larger GCs in the industry over to Peacock, who definitely is on the smaller side? Some would say small to medium, some would say small. What's the experience been like in the shift?
That's a great question. And lots of people ask me that. Working with Webcor, there were projects that were in the billions of dollars. And now I'm working on projects that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know what I mean? There's just a huge discrepancy or disparity between the two. But it's actually a lot of fun. I really enjoy the smaller quick hits of working on these smaller projects. Large projects also have large staff, and sometimes lots of risks and lots of headaches. It's nice to have, the smaller projects, things that are, under 30 million bucks. Again, smaller staff, it's a lot more manageable. Working with Peacock specifically, and what's the difference between a smaller contractor is there's not as much red tape. There's not as many processes and basically hurdles to jump through. The decision process for me is a whole heck of a lot quicker. I report directly to our CFO and CO, CFO. Sorry, not CFO. Kyle is our president. I report directly to him, so it's nice not to have to go through a lot of layers of management. I can get an answer really, really quickly from him. Let's see here. The other nice thing about working at a smaller company is the staff, and what I mean by that is, like I said earlier, we don't have huge teams, so our staff are used to kind of doing everything or doing a lot. They do estimating, they do their own bidding, they do their own RFIs. You know what I mean? We do have engineers and other project support, but for the most part, our PMs and engineers and superintendents are very, very well equipped to basically take on the entirety of the project. You work on at larger companies, they'll have kind of an estimating department and a pre-con department and a BIM department and an accounting department and a quality control department and a safety department. Yeah, we don't have that. We have those processes and we have people that head those things up, but it's not a whole department, which is really nice. So it kind of gives control back to the project manager and the project team to make sure that all of those things are taken care of.
Additionally,
does that make sense?
Absolutely. On top of that, it also allows young talent who comes into your company to develop versatile skill sets. They're not just going to be a project manager focused on PMing the project. They will learn pre-con. They will learn client relationships. And they'll also be learning from people who have well-versed backgrounds. So for someone who's young and in the industry, I've noticed a lot of large companies can find themselves pigeonholing people early on in their career. Something I believe Turner Construction, just as an example, does very well is they give their young talent the ability to branch out, to try different things. And it sounds like this is the same type of situation. Not many large companies do that. And actually, I've spoken to several lately who are trying to put an emphasis on giving young people the ability to test more, try more, because it's what a lot of the younger generation wants. They want flexibility. They want to be able to figure out what they want in their career. It's less of the old school, hey, get here, do what you're told, don't ask too many questions, and more of the younger people want to ask questions. They want flexible career paths. They want one-to-one mentorship. And it sounds like with this environment, they're really getting a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And furthermore, if you're working on a big job and you're an engineer, potentially you can get stuck on a very, very specific scope of work, like say doors or glass and glazing or painting. I mean, those scopes of work can be in the tens of millions of dollars just for that very limited scope. It's a very important responsibility, but it's a very, very limited experience of the project, right? You're not looking at at everything else, at how mechanical interacts with electrical, and fire life safety interacts with, air balance. It's just, it's very limited. So the nice thing about working on a smaller project is you get to see all of the aspects, all of the different scopes of work, all of the different trades, and be kind of an integral part to make sure that it's properly coordinated, which is a wonderful thing.
Especially for those who want to develop a well-rounded skill set, not necessarily to be niche specific and have your small niche that you work in, which, hey, all the power to you if that's the path you want to choose. But a lot of the executives I've talked to who have really risen in the ranks throughout the construction industry have had a versatile background because they can add value to different parts of the business. And it sounds like the experience at Peacock for young talent or for mid-career talent can definitely be that. And for anybody who comes in. But at the end of the day, you probably won't recruit someone who's more senior, who doesn't have that versatile experience, because that's not the type of culture that you run at Peacock. Is that pretty fair to say?
That's perfectly said. Yeah, absolutely. Agree.
Awesome. Well, another interesting thing I found is when a company like Peacock has the ability to recruit someone like you who comes from larger GCs as their background, oftentimes they're able to get a ton of value from a Rey Altamirano of the world, because you can come in, you've seen very formalized systems and processes, companies with significant structure built into them. And a lot of times smaller GCs not fly by the seat of their pants, maybe fly by the seat of their pants a little bit, but there's less structure, depending on the company, depending on how things are run.
Yes.
So what has your process been like, or what has your experience been like joining the team at Peacock in terms of being able to bring a value add to the systems and processes on the team?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's kind of been one of my struggles as well. I mean, I love the fact that Peacock has been around for 40 years, and they've been really diligent about improving and about putting controls and processes in place to be successful and to serve their clients. So they've done a really good job at that. But they also understand that there's room to grow. There are additional things that a person like me that's worked at the Swinnertons and Webcores of the world, that bring kind of an experience of working with larger tools, softwares and whatnot to make sure that projects are running smoothly. But one of the hesitations that folks have is this tool really going to help me? I got this. I've been doing this for 40 years this way. Your tool, your spreadsheet, these metrics that you want to implement, are they really going to help us? If they do, then great. that's one of the things I really respect about Kyle. He allows us to give it a shot. He may not agree with it, but he says, the fact that you've worked with these larger companies, and they're doing it, let's give it a shot. So he's been great at that. I think everyone realizes that cool tools are great and these bigger processes are good, but they're not the end all be all. It's really the people and making sure that, you're making the connection and that you're properly communicating and coordinating, these critical aspects and constraints that we find in our daily work. And that's one of the things that I think we do very, very well. If we need a tool, we'll use it, but it's not necessarily the end all be all. Sometimes when you have so many tools, there's kind of a over reliance on the tool itself and not on the people that you're working with. Bigger companies, bigger tools isn't always better. We recently completed a project for Seton Hospital in Daly City. It was the relocation of a central sterile processing department. And they basically had a deadline to basically be moved out in January of this year. And the central sterile department had to be basically demolished, and there was lots of structural elements that were going into that space. So they needed to relocate it. They'd gone round and round with Swinnerton and other contractors and architects to develop a solution to basically relocate this thing. And they kind of ran in circles and kind of ran out of time. A friend of mine, Michelle Malone, was a consultant. She's a CM, and she partnered with Seton, gave me a call and said, Ray, we got to take care of this. Like tomorrow, we got to get these guys out of here. That was in October of last year. So in 4 months, we were able to design, permit, build, and occupy the space, which is kind of a record time for a department like that. Seton was able to maintain all of their surgeries that they have. Central Sterile is a department that basically cleans all the instrumentation that goes into the ORs, right? So all of that equipment has to be sterilized and cleansed and cleaned. Not having this department would have been a huge issue for them. We were able to save Seton over $2 million. They had originally had a budget of about $4 million to do this work. We did it for half of that, and we did it in 4 months. So it was really a testament to kind of a small team. We rolled up our sleeves. We worked with the city of Daly City to kind of start some early demo and do evaluation and survey of the existing space. And I got to say that one of the major reasons why we succeeded on that project was relationships. We had some incredible subcontractors on that project that I had worked with at Swinnerton and Webcor. We had Contra Costa Electric, we had Control Air North, we had Leskier Plumbing. Each of those contractors worked with me on my very first hospital project 20 years ago there at Kaiser Antioch. I mentioned that earlier. So long-standing relationships with those guys. Yes, this was a smaller job, but again, because of the relationships we have with these specific companies and others as well, like PCI and other folks, again, we're able to bring the horsepower when we need it to basically help get things done. Another thing that I think differentiated us as well and helped us to succeed was our self-perform work. So we do self-perform work, carpentry. So we did self-perform quite a bit of framing and medical equipment installations and drywall, just miscellaneous ceiling work, just you name it. So we were able to have guys there on hand to do that work immediately while still maintaining the surrounding departments that were in full operation. So that was a huge reason why we had succeeded.
You bring up an interesting point. It is so much about the people. I took on a search the other day. It's an executive search for a top 25 E&R company. And they had explained to me, 80 plus years later, doing $5 billion a year, they're just now implementing Procore. So basically they had been, going as a very successful company for a long time. And they didn't have a lot of these important quote unquote softwares that so many people hold true to the core of their business, yet they were still able to get to a $5 billion a year company executing mega projects consistently year after year. likely on the back of having phenomenal people in their company. You do not get to that point without having phenomenal players on your team. So I think what you bring up is so interesting.
Great.
Yes, you bring value add from coming from the big boys in the industry, right? You bring major value add to systems, to processes, but you're also an A player. You bring the spirit of someone who has executed projects successfully over your entire career. You bring great relationships to the table. And without that, what is the success of a construction company?
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. So another thing I thought was really interesting in our last conversation was when you brought up work-life balance. There are a lot of companies I talk to who talk about work-life balance, but when I actually talk to their employees, they tell me we work 60-hour, 70-hour weeks consistently. I am home at, I leave the job site at 6 or 7 because I get caught up doing work and I have a lot going on. And when I get home, it's late. And when I wake up, it's 4 a.m. to get to the job site and I have a commute, right? And on the flip side, you explained that at Peacock, you work 40 hours a week. That's almost unheard of out here. So what's the experience, the shift been like going to a company where, Kyle, the president, supports that type of work-life balance?
Yeah. Maybe not quite 40 hours a week, maybe closer to 50, but it's definitely in there. Again, I think the nice thing about Peacock, it's family owned and very family oriented. And there's a really big push to have the work-life balance. Talking to Kyle a couple of weeks ago, he said, Ray, it's really important for me that our employees are home for dinner, go to their kids' games, and participate in family life. We have to have that. If the individual, doesn't have that, then he's not fully thriving and not completely himself. So that was huge for me, coming from him. And he means it. Lots of our superintendents and project managers are little league coaches in their communities for their kids' teams or friends' kids' teams. One of my favorite guys we have, Ken Armrich. He's our senior superintendent, crusty old guy, been with us for 30 years. He grew up in Alameda, played baseball and football and basketball at Alameda High School there. Still has the record for high scoring in basketball. Anyway, he has been the head coach there for 23 years. He actually heads up their entire baseball program for the last 23 years. It's a huge part of his life. He works, 50 hours a week with us. And then the other 20 to 30, he works with, the Alameda school kids there at the high school. So just an incredible person, great coach, great worker, great human being, good guy to be around. And to me, that makes all the difference. You have to have people that really love what they do and have lives that are complete. And that's such a big part of us, making sure that we're plugged into our communities and plugged into our families. And it's not just the talk. It's something that we are pushed to do. In fact, at my last review, that was one of the things that I had to improve, is to spend more time outside the office with the family. So anyway, that's huge for us.
I find that very interesting because someone like Ken is someone who is a very seasoned construction professional. I'm sure he brings a lot of value to the table in terms of helping with construction. But as a leader, 30 years on the team, oftentimes we want these people to lead by example. So by giving this person the freedom to be a coach and mentor outside of construction, I would assume, sometimes assumptions lead to not the best things, but I would assume that this gives him a perspective of coaching and mentorship that possibly even makes him better at his job as a leader within the team, and also helps him show up fresh to work, show up doing something he's passionate on the side. I believe there's a lot of benefits that might not seem as direct benefits as I do XYZ type of construction. I'm great at construction, but rather the soft skills side of things, mentoring, leading, coaching, and developing the team.
Yeah, 100%. I would probably suck as a baseball coach. I mean, this guy he has so much patience. And I think just like you said, his soft skills and emotional intelligence, his ability to basically read people, to motivate people, to speak to people, he's got it. It's amazing. His ability to talk to our workers out in the field, find out who they are, develop relationships with, the foremen and the journeymen that are out in the field. It's amazing to watch this guy work. And it's amazing to see how nicely and smoothly his projects go. It's kind of sickening. They always go so smoothly because of, Ken's ability to read people and know what's coming. And I don't know, he's Ken, and he's just an amazing, amazing person. So definitely, I think that his ability to, again, work with kids and the patience that he's developed and love that he's developed, with the individuals that he, coaches and mentors, definitely translates into what he's doing here at work. He's making a huge difference.
Love it. Love it. Coming from a sports background myself, I definitely had some coaches who were impactful. I also know they had full-time jobs. So when they would come to coach us, a lot of time it was a passion project for them. And, it's going back to the sports days is always fun. But something that I really have been looking to dive into with you is the fact that when you came into Peacock, from what I remember you saying, they were doing somewhere around 10 million, I believe it was. Is that right, in healthcare construction? And you basically helped them 10x in the few years you've been there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, pretty close. Anywhere between $5 to $10 million is kind of where they were ranging, depending on the year. Peacock primarily was doing commercial work, and mostly TIs in San Francisco and in Oakland. That was kind of their primary focus and their bread and butter. So when I got here, they had a relationship with folks like Sutter and Oakland Children's Hospital. They were doing some work with Kaiser, but it was, on the smaller scale, just kind of small projects here and there. We did have individuals with healthcare backgrounds, but they were mostly focused on commercial work. So one of the things that I attribute our success to is not necessarily Rey Altamirano, but COVID, because in COVID, with COVID, lots of the industry kind of took a downturn. A lot of the commercial work started to dry up. Well, healthcare didn't. Healthcare continued to move forward. So we were able to kind of refocus and retool and basically send folks out and train them and get them out on the healthcare projects. Again, folks that had the skill set, folks that had the experience, were, quickly able to get mobilized and to answer the need. There was plenty of healthcare work out there. Peacock wasn't necessarily targeting that work, but once I got here and everything else started to dry up, we were definitely motivated to, continue to stay busy and keep our folks busy and join the healthcare division. So that's gone really, really well.
So from what I remember, you went from 5 to 10 million a year to 100 million a year within just a few years, and you want to double again? Is that number right?
So overall, Peacock Construction overall, we're about $100 million company. And of that, our healthcare division was somewhere about 5 to 10 million bucks. So healthcare is now kind of ranging more in tune of the $30 to $40 million worth of work on a yearly basis. So we're hovering at about $30 to $40 million a year in healthcare, from 5 to 10. Yeah.
That's a boom right there. It just goes to show that pivot that your team took in the middle of COVID was one that we talked about earlier on the podcast, and how valuable it can be for a team to be versatile in times like this and markets like this. So for someone like you to come in to a team who already has existing relationships in healthcare, and on top of that, you have very solid background and track record in healthcare, it seems like you couldn't have joined Peacock at a better time.
That's exactly right. In fact, my first day at Peacock was the day of the shelter in place. So I remember that was 2020. I think it was March 17th. Like, we're coming up on the anniversary there on St. Patty's Day. I had joined Peacock and I hadn't started yet. I got a call from Kyle, on the morning of the 17th. And he said, "Ray, I think we need to pause and maybe just have you, start, once this COVID thing blows over." And I said, "Yeah, that's fine. But, how are you managing, delays and impacts and cost overruns and potential claims from your subcontractors because of delays?" your hospital projects need to move forward. Are you making sure you're doing everything to keep those going? Do you have COVID, plans in place? And he said to me, yeah, why don't you go ahead and come on in? We'll go ahead and make sure that those items that you just rattled off are addressed. And so I ended up starting that day on the 17th of March. And yeah, it's been great. Definitely trial by fire, for sure. Starting a new company during COVID, for sure.
And on top of that, getting my numbers right, going from 5 to 40 million. So you 8x'd in about 3 years, and you want to double again in the next coming years. So clearly you're driving massive impact to the company. Clearly you're allowing them to succeed in a market that has been, for some people, questionable, for some people, difficult. And of course, like you said, it's not just Rey Altamirano, but it seems to me that you play a very key part in what your team's doing right now based on your background, your relationships. And it just goes to show what a strategic executive hire can do for a company, especially in tough times like this. Some people might be thinking, oh, I have to add another multiple six-figure salary to my staff right now when times are tough. And they're thinking about the cost. But what is the opportunity cost of not having a Rey Altamirano on your team to help? Look what you did. I mean, you're talking about adding potentially in the next 3-4 years, $80 million of medical or of healthcare work to your team as a result of bringing on a strategic executive in yourself. So just goes to show the value of thinking big and taking risks in life that can definitely at times pay off if they're calculated risks and they're the right people on the right team.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree. But I can't say enough about Peacock and the folks that we had here, and the project managers and superintendents and just the good solid builders and all of the relationship building that they had in place, which allowed me to, just like you said, pivot and continue to grow that. So, yeah.
I'm sure the lack of red tape helped as well. There's not as much red tape, so you can move a little faster, pivot a little faster when needed.
Yes, almost uncomfortably so. Absolutely. Yes.
Nice little change of pace. And speaking of that, something I found to be very interesting when talking to construction companies is some people's open-mindedness to hiring people who don't fit 10 out of 10 boxes that they were looking to check during a search. And I talked to some companies like yourself. We had a conversation before about how your team finds the flexibility and support to hire people who might not have a ton of construction background, but they have very solid culture fitness. They have the attitude that you want on the team, and your team finds ways to develop, coach, mentor types of people who a lot of companies would have to shrink their talent pool because we're talking about a very specific type of person they would need. Whereas Peacock, they're flexible and they're willing to bring on people and give them the coaching, the mentorship, and the guidance to then grow through their career and find success in construction. Can you talk a little bit about how that's impacted your ability as a team to grow with the right people, but maybe not the person who you might have thought of initially when you started the search?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's really important to have construction savvy individuals on your projects, especially on healthcare projects. But we do just all kinds of stuff. We also do a lot of TI projects in San Francisco, simpler paint and carpet, doors, frames and hardware, just really simple things, which is nice because, like we said earlier, those can be a great training ground for individuals to learn with not a lot of risk. Obviously we wouldn't throw, a brand new project engineer that has limited construction experience on a very technical, OR project in a hospital. That would just be setting them up for failure. But having these smaller projects that have a quick turn gives us the ability to kind of train in real time on smaller projects. We do have an initiative that we're working on, because we can always improve, to basically help develop our employees. So kind of an onboarding checklist that we're really working on and striving to implement, making sure that everyone gets the proper training so that we have consistency between healthcare projects and commercial projects, big projects and little projects, just so that our employees have kind of a steady and clear path to move forward in their growth and understanding of construction and managing projects, managing clients, managing risks. So we're really striving hard to push that process through. Another big initiative is our job startups. So again, we have lots of projects that are constantly starting, even smaller ones that can be just a couple $100,000. It's really important for us to make sure that we're putting all of the proper precautions in place, regardless of the size, so that we can be successful and properly serving our clients. So yeah, I would say that working at a company like Peacock on some of these smaller projects really makes it a lot easier for an individual to come on board, kind of learn what we do and how we do things, and come up to speed pretty quickly.
That's beautiful right there.
In terms of backgrounds too, like you're absolutely right. We have guys that have worked in sales management and IT, newscaster, just come from different, very, very different backgrounds. We have lots of folks that kind of grew up building stuff, which is great. So we do have lots of hands-on, craftsmen, which is really, really cool to work with those types of individuals as well. But everyone brings something different, which, collectively makes us stronger, I think.
The whole idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, these type of recruitment initiatives, building the company initiatives, it's so interesting to bring people from different backgrounds, with different perspectives, to see how we can bring it all together and build a thriving company like your team's doing. It reminds me, what you're saying, of my first job out of college. My first job was, I finished playing college sports. I was hungry, I was determined, but I was green as could be in anything business related. I just was green as could be. So long story short, I started in a window and door sales position. We also did some exterior remodeling, but it was a residential remodeling company. My dad was currently the sales manager / general manager of Northern California, and he took me under his wing. And as I was going, if you were to throw me out to the field on day one to sell, it was laughable. It would have been hilarious for someone to be a fly on the wall when I was selling to these families. Don't know what to say. Don't even know how to measure windows or style windows properly. I'm going out there, just happy-go-lucky guy, ready to show up, work hard, study hard. But I needed mentorship. That's the truth. And so what they did to help me, and my dad was such a phenomenal mentor for me, he would take me on calls with him where I could ride along with him and watch him close sales and execute the sales process and all of these things that were a part of becoming a proficient window and exterior remodel salesman. And so thinking back, that was the most impactful experiences I had, with being able to be in the trenches, to watch my dad do his thing. I look up to him in so many ways, but he taught me, really looking back on it, the basis for my sales career. And he gave me a love for sales and also a love for the construction industry, because I got to mentor under him. So it sounds like you take a similar approach. It reminds me of a quote that someone said on my podcast. I'm getting the backlog's getting longer on the podcast, but Brent Kelly from Corgan. He said, I give my team enough rope to test the waters, enough rope to grow and stretch, but not enough rope to hang themselves. In other words, you're not going to put a brand new project engineer on a massive project, right? Because they'll be a little in over their head. Just like I would have been walking into a home with 500 windows, not even knowing where to start. But I was able to go receive mentorship under my dad. And it sounds like it's a similar process with you. You believe in mentorship, putting people in the field with people who can help them grow and expand their skill sets. And for me, it was invaluable. And I've heard it be successful for a lot of other construction companies too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me personally, I take for granted what I know. I've been in construction since I was a kid, and I've been, building walls, installing carpets, replacing plumbing since I was a kid. So to me, it's just very natural, and I take it for granted. And when folks come on board, I think that they know as much as I know, which is not always the case. So it is important for us to make sure that we have, a process, some sort of rigor where we make sure that the individuals that we're working with, are receiving the training and are receiving the information, the way in which we do things, so that there's consistency in the product that we put forward to our clients. It's just important to make sure that we measure these things properly. So if a person isn't ready to, do change orders or do, bids on their own, that we don't set ourselves or them up to fail. So.
And you also talked about something very similar to what we're talking about now, which is when we're executing projects like these healthcare projects, they're critical. It's critical that they're done right, because if they don't, people's lives can be at stake, and you won't know until the project is done oftentimes. So I'm sure that drives a passion for what you do. But can you explain how that plays into
Yeah.
your level of urgency, the importance you place on executing projects right? How do these mission critical, or I don't know if mission critical is the right word, these critical projects to our society, how does that play into the way you address a project?
Yeah. So I definitely have a passion for healthcare. Um, you know, hospitals and clinics and, the whole healthcare community, they're the heartbeat of our communities and of our country. Without them, where would we go? So people go to hospitals and to these facilities for refuge and to be healed. The last thing we would want, it would be, to basically cause harm or be someone that causes harm to them. So I'm so proud of some of the projects that I've worked on. The Kaiser Antioch project, my brother-in-law works for Kaiser. He's an anesthesiologist. So he's in the ORs that we built on a daily basis. And I love that. And the last thing I would ever want would be for a boom or something to fall or the med gas to fail because of something that we did. That's, again, people's lives are at stakes, people's children, parents. And to me, it's something that we have to make sure that we do properly. A lot of people complain about OSHPD and how, big of a pain in the butt they are and how much they cost, construction because of all of their inspections and rigor that they put forward. I agree with some of that, but at the same time, I'm happy they're there because it really forces people to be accountable and to do things properly. And we need that. We need that because I think sometimes naturally people will do, as little as they have to. So to me, making sure that people have the right skills and the knowledge and really have the passion. I think it's important when you're doing healthcare work is to really have a passion for what you're doing. Because it does. It really affects people's lives. If you're working on a TI and, a door fails, no big deal. If it fails during a fire, then that is a huge deal. So I think it's important to make sure that we're training our individuals to really, really go, take the extra step in making sure that what they do is right. I feel very, very passionately about that. So healthcare, I think, makes us better builders. We're forced to. We have to. There's the level of inspections and the permits and everything we have to do really forces us to take a better look at making sure that it's done perfectly and done well. And I actually appreciate that.
Just goes to show, where would the world be without great construction leaders? Where would we be? It's so critical. And I think, like we sometimes talk about on the show, sometimes construction as an industry doesn't get enough love. There's a stigma about it. The people who don't come from the industry don't get it, and they don't see how great career paths can be in construction. But at the end of the day, construction professionals build the roads we drive on, the houses we live in, the hospitals we go to. They built our world for the most part, right? Like they built the modern world that we live in. So much respect to you all who are in the field making this happen, maybe in the office making this happen. The people who are building the world, I mean, it can't go overlooked. People really need to have a more holistic, as a society, a respect for construction and a love for construction, because where would it be without you guys and gals? Where would it be without you? So thank you for what you do, most definitely. So as we always like to finish off the show, I'd like to hear from your perspective, what advice would you like to give to a young construction professional who would like to be in your shoes someday?
It's a great question. It's funny. Like I said, I had 5 kids. I have 3 girls and 2 sons. What I really urge them to do is to do something that they have a passion for, that they can really put their heart and soul into. And to me, you were mentioning how grateful you were to good builders. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to bridge kind of what I love and what I have a passion for with my technical ability. And I'm able to execute on that every day. I get to, do what my heart loves to do and then also do what my hands and brain love to do as well. and I think I'm very lucky to have that opportunity. And that's what I would want for anyone of my children is to be able to kind of bridge their skill sets with their passion in life. It's also an honor to me to serve our community and to serve, these individuals that run these hospitals and what they do. It's also a great responsibility. And that really gives me a connection. It gives me a connection to my community. It kind of gives me a purpose. And for that, super grateful. So I would say the construction industry is so huge too. You can do so many things. I have a son that's at Cal Poly right now. He's also a CM major, and he loves it. And I think he's seen in me that there's so much you can do. You can do sales, you can do design, you can do construction, management, financial stuff. There's just a whole plethora of opportunities to do. It's such a broad industry, and there's so many opportunities for you to really plug into something that you really, really love and find something that you really, really love. So to me, I would say find something that really gets you going and again, try to plug into your community or something that you're passionate about to make it all work for you.
What you said to cap that off was exactly what I was thinking when you were talking. I was thinking Ray has found a sense of purpose in his career. That's what everything you were saying added up to me. It sounds like you found your purpose, something that drives you, something that gets you up excited out of bed every day, passionate to do what you do. And I think the other piece you finished with about how there's so many different types of opportunities in construction is a message that the general person needs to hear more often. It's so much respect for the people in the trades, like I always say. People who are actually in the trenches, swinging the hammers, getting the work done, getting these buildings built, structures built, infrastructure built. Cheers to them. But there's so much more beyond that for people to consider other than just that type of work. There are so many aspects to this business and so much opportunity. And I don't see it going away anytime soon. We are continuing to advance this world every single day. So cheers to all of you guys and gals who are out there building this amazing world. And it's just such a pleasure to have you on the show today, Ray. I appreciate the message you share and spotlighting your company and your career. It's definitely one that I believe a lot of people in construction would love to be in your shoes someday. So just want to say thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it. It's been great talking to you.